The closer you get to God, the stronger your discernment is going to grow. So the more that you're going to be able to distinguish between false teachings and the truth of God. Here are 5 false teachings that we as Christians need to be avoiding. Number 1, the idea that every Christian should speak in tongues in order to be saved. This is a non-biblical concept. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 12 verse 30, do we all have the ability to speak in unknown languages? Paul was telling us in this scripture that not everyone is going to have the gift of tongues. Romans 10 verse 9 tells us that you do not need to speak in tongues in order to be saved. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So if a church is ever telling you if you don't speak in tongues, you're not saved, that is a false teaching. False teaching number 2, the idea that every Christian should be healthy and wealthy. The Bible actually suggests more dangers to money than blessings. God never once in the Bible promises that every person who follows him will have wealth, nor does it promise that every Christian will be free of sickness. Jesus was not rich, nor were his disciples, okay? The only disciple that followed Jesus that cared about money was Judas, and he ended up betraying Jesus for money. The Bible repeatedly warns us of being consumed with the love of money. And I'm not saying that having money is bad. I'm not saying that money is bad, but it's putting it before God. When someone idolizes it or desires it before God, then that is when it becomes a sin. Matthew 6:24 says, no one can serve 2 masters. You cannot serve both God and money. You have to recognize that when you have Christ, you are already rich. Maybe not in the world's goods, but in spiritual riches. Moral of the story, if God entrusts you with money, don't idolize it. Psalm 62 verse 10 says, though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. So money can be either a blessing or a curse, depending on the person. The third Christian false teaching that is being preached today is that a Christian can lose their salvation. Ephesians 2 verse 8 through 9 says, for it is by grace that you have been saved. It is not by yourselves. It is a gift from God, not by works. One objection that most people would say is, what about those Christians that are living unrepentant, worldly, sinful lifestyles? And the problem with those objections is the assumption that everyone who calls himself a Christian is actually born again. The Bible actually tells us that a true Christian will not live a life of continual unrepentant sin. 1 John 3 verse 6 says, no one who abides in him keeps on sinning. No one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. They may look or appear religious or put on a great facade, but someone who truly has God will not continue to live in an unrepentant state of sin. The Bible tells us that you will know them by their fruit. Salvation is a gift from God. The fourth false teaching is the idea that Christians can speak or declare things into existence. This is manifestation. We do not have the power to create things into existence. Romans 4 verse 17 says, it is God who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. The fifth false teaching that we Christians need to be avoiding is hyper grace, which is the mentality that we can do whatever we want because God will forgive us. Just because we serve a forgiving God does not allow us the opportunity to take advantage of his grace, nor is it a license to sin. Romans 6 verse 2 says, are we able to continue in sin so that grace may increase? May it never be. This mentality perverts the grace of God as a license for immorality and sin. So we should not be thinking that we are saved so we can continue to sin and be forgiven and stay in that pattern of unrepentant sin. God is a forgiving God, but don't take advantage of his grace.